Hi, this is Tyler Choice. I'm a practicing Insight Vipassana mindfulness teacher, and in this video I'd like to share about the practice of forgiveness in terms of deep healing. A little bit about me. I am a researcher quite a bit, and I have for quite a few years been learning the cutting edge healing techniques in the space, and I've done a lot of grief work myself. Just that's the path I've been on, is the inner healing, inner work journey, and I'd like to share some of that with you today. So, if you'd like to hear more, I invite you to just set an intention with a. I'll actually make a prayer for myself here to share the most value that I can in this time. And so I'd like to invite you to explore with me what forgiveness might be, what it might look like, and I'll go over forgiveness a bit, and then share a few resources, and then share a pretty powerful technique I'm aware of that you can look into yourself. The topic of forgiveness is often the source of our deepest pains and triggers, and we, as humans, we don't like to feel pain, we don't like to be reminded of it. I believe that if you have looked into mindfulness at all and you are engaged in that practice, maybe that's how you're aware of this channel, mindfulness or meditation, that that area of focus, mindfulness, looking within, looking into self-inquiry, it creates risk. The risk of having to look at ourselves and be exposed to our pains that we avoid. So I think that shows some courage, and it also shows like character. You care enough to take that kind of risk, to take on a little bit of suffering. And when I think of forgiveness or not being held back by things, I think of how do I want to be? Who do I want to be? And I remember Alex Hormozy on YouTube saying that he was holding on to grudges that let someone else have power over him. And he realized that he hated that. He despised the idea of someone else having power over him. And so I think he had to forgive. Not sure about his journey. To me, there's something kind of empowering about the idea of forgiveness, where it's like you have a choice to not allow someone else to be an influence in the way you feel and an influence in your life. And when I share about forgiveness here, my intention is not to appeal to morality or something that you should do, but my appeal is to your self-interest, that forgiveness is not about someone else, and you don't even have to tell someone else that you forgive them when you do, if you do. I learned from someone that forgiving someone might even mean that what that might look like them not being in your life anymore, depending on what's going on. And there's a quote kind of with the empowerment idea that someone went to, was confined by captors in a containment camp or for a long period of time, and when they asked, like, how did you stay sane, how did you kind of get out of this unscathed, and they were like, no matter what they did to me, my captors did to me, they couldn't make me hate them. And there's this like human trait of that power of choice there to actually not allow, not to give them the satisfaction of hating them, not to give them anything. So, when I look at what is forgiveness, and I see that it is unclear to most people, I think it's this ambiguous concept, and it's an abstract word that we use to look at what happens when we move on from the past. And I imagine that there's kind of this space, this kind of area in time where something happens that we were stuck in the past and we move on from the past. And that the memories and feelings that were surfacing over and over are now gone and we have moved on. That to me is like somewhere, whatever forgiveness is, somewhere in that bubble, at the end of it, we've moved on. And I think the topic is like asking what happens in that process. And how do we learn to let the past go so that we can live in the present? And my view of that is that when we're holding on to something that we don't want to let go of, it's like every feeling that we have is on a conveyor belt and it's moving toward this large emotional processing machine that just eats up everything. It's this oven, and everything on the conveyor belt is coming towards it. And when we are like, oh, I don't want to forgive that, I want to hold back here, we grab on to that item on the conveyor belt and we hold it back. And like if that was like a plate of sushi on a sushi conveyor belt, we're now holding it, and instead of it going and getting processed by this machine that processes all of our feelings, it's just sitting there now, and food starts to go bad, so it starts to rot over time, and we've got a pretty big problem. And the feeling is unresolved. So if we were to let go and it goes through the conveyor belt, it goes through our emotional processing machine, it resolves. This unresolved feeling becomes resolved, and then we move on with our lives. We forget it was ever there because we're living our life. I call that healing. So where I see that forgiveness is more abstract is that what I notice is that when these feelings go through our processing, go through the conveyor belt and then go through the processing machine, emotional processing unit, just as a metaphor, the product that machine produces is understanding. When we process our feelings, when we process the experiences and things that happen to us, we gain something called understanding. And I'll come back to this. But to me, this is why people say forgiveness is understanding. It actually, that is the product of feelings, of resolution, of what happens when we things happen. We intake data and then we process that data. We result in the product, which is called understanding. And people notice that when they forgive someone, they say that they find that they understand them more. And this usually does, as an abstract concept, forgiveness usually does have to be something you have to deal with if you're trying to get through grief. And to reiterate, if I hold on to unresolved pain, I'm affected by it, and then I'm holding back from who I would be if I was free and just present in the moment. And there's more to withholding than that, and it's that whatever I don't forgive for you, I don't accept about myself. Usually regarding adult relationships. When it comes to inner child trauma, there's also a withholding, but it's not that we're withholding acceptance from some perpetrator of that's hurt us. We're withholding the acceptance from the inner child, from ourself, and withholding it from ourselves now and from ourselves, our younger self. So I encourage people to research self-forgiveness, and there's Brené Brown is in the space, is someone popular in the wellness sphere, and Byron Katie to look into. And there's groups I might add a link here. I think they're called grief recovery support groups, but they're for you can get support just specifically for the grief process. Then there is also someone on YouTube, Mami Onami, who has a book called Painkillers, which has about a 20-minute grief process that you can do on your own, and it's powerful. It's a powerful application of. I think it's the best available way to go about that process in terms of pain efficiency and And if you are practicing mindfulness, you might notice that the idea of pursuing forgiveness might be something that you can have some wisdom about when you approach it. Whereas if you're in your normal headspace, that might be different than if you just, say, got out of a loving kindness meditation and feel like you're holding and supporting yourself, and you feel that expanded sense of like, I'm bigger than my feelings, than my emotions. There's more goodness in me than is the experience of that. So that might be a better time to approach that kind of inner work. Now, my personal relationship with self-forgiveness is mostly around time binge drinking in my late teens and early 20s, and the relationship strife and pain that caused to others, and found like when I started to forgive myself, started to realize that I was suffering a lot in that too, and that was kind of the first fruit of the healing. And then I'm now able to grant others some self-compassion when they are in the midst of addiction, and I see them, and I've recognized that that's the only thing that they really need, and often that's the only real thing that you can give them is accepting them where they're at, and just like, this is where you're at right now. Okay, you're in the middle of the lowest point. Okay, I accept you there. That's just what's happening. So I recently went through some more forgiving of my mom, and the statement is, I heard from a teacher, is forgiving someone is remembering that you love them. Forgiving someone is remembering that you love them. And loving someone is accepting how they are right now, not with the old baggage that you remember about them, but accepting and recognizing that they are the way they are. They're probably not going to change, especially if they're family. And accepting that is like giving them permission to exist. Accepting that they are the way they are. Not trying to make them different. And then there's noticing how you tell yourself that you have to be. And I mentioned withholding, and it's the same kind of withholding that we do to ourselves all the time. And this is in the practice of self-love and really self-work. Is with withholding, we don't just do it with acceptance and forgiveness. We do it with a lot of things. It's very often say, I won't give you any validation until you get this right, until you stop failing. I'm going to put a gun to your head until you get this right. You're not getting any compassion from me. You're not getting any validation from me. And then a lot of us that don't have pretty active practices of self-care, when we actually do get the success and we actually do get it right, we don't give ourselves the validation that we promised, which sends a message to ourselves that we can't be trusted, because you tell me to do something and I do it, and you tell me that I'll get something for it, and then you don't give me it. If you do that 2 or 3 times, why would I trust you anymore? Why would I believe that you're going to follow through on the deal? And then people are like, I don't know why I can't get myself to do something. It's because you taught yourself that you can't be trusted. So to repair that relationship, you got to put in some work, just the same way of any other relationship. There's no difference. Now there's a phenomenon that happens that's strange, and I don't know why it happens. I don't know how it happens, but I've seen it happen, and I've heard many reports from many sources of other people seeing it happen. But when you do that with someone, when you accept that they are the way that they are, it's like a few weeks, like even if you're not talking to them, a few weeks happen, a few weeks pass, or maybe months or whatever, where they contact you and you find out that this whole time they've completely changed that behavior that you couldn't accept about them. And somehow it's like when you gave them permission to exist as they were, that somehow gave them the space to change. Maybe that's not a metaphysical thing. Maybe they were used to something that you did that you stopped doing it, and then what do I do now? And then instead, maybe that's what breaks the pattern. I don't know how that works, but I have seen it happen. So at the end of this video, I'd like to tell you about Byron Katie's The Work and give you an example of how it works. It is mindfulness backed. It's used worldwide. It's incredibly powerful in grief work and forgiveness work and self-acceptance and inner work, which is why it's so popular. And this practice is super simple. It's another reason why it's so popular. It sounds kind of like a practice that you might have seen in a school class or something, but I think most people would say that the kind of homework that you get in school for doing self-work, it's forgettable. It's worthless to me. I don't like to sound overly critical, but to be honest, There's a big difference between a very powerful practice and something that some journaling that you wrote down that maybe it was good for that day, but it's not something that changes your world. So the work practice starts with just this 4-part process, and it goes: you take a belief, you isolate a belief, you look at a story, a situation, or something, you figure out what's the belief in that, and then you say, is this true? Can you absolutely know that this is true? How do I feel when I believe that this is true? There's a little bit more to it, like how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? What images do you see as you witness those images? This is self-inquiry. You're starting to self-inquire. And how did you treat the other person in this situation? How did you treat yourself? Do any obsessions or addictions begin to appear when you believe this thought? Then who would I be without this thought? Who would I be without this belief? And how would you see the other person? If you dropped all your judgments and then you look, you see what would be revealed there. And then there's a last part called the turnaround, where you reverse the belief and see what the opposite of it is. And that happens 2 or 3 times, the turnaround. Sometimes it'll be 2 or 3 turnarounds of reversing the belief and seeing what's there. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense. It's the part of the practice that's harder to get right. I don't even know. I haven't been trained in the work, so I don't know if I would get it right for more difficult beliefs, or even for the one I'll share in this one. So that's the part that you're recommended to get some training on, which I do plan to get in the short term here. So I'll try it with my thought, with my belief. I'll go with this statement. And it's, my mom doesn't accept me and won't give me validation because of her religion, Christianity. Now if I look at that, is that true? Is it true? Yeah. Can I absolutely know that this is true? No. So how do I feel when I believe this is true? Or how do I react? What happens when I believe that thought? I feel like I'm not enough. I feel like I'm not worthy of validation or acceptance. I feel like there's actually no way to get the validation that I want. There's like almost no hope, or no like that I'm almost cursed, that I'm almost held down, like there's no possible way to receive the validation that I'm seeking. And then who would I be without that thought? And when I've looked at that, I usually see myself as happy, smiling, just kind of the pure, natural version of me. Definitely accepting everyone, loving everyone. And then what's the opposite of that thought? Like I said, hopefully doing this right. Take it with a grain of salt. And if I reverse my mother doesn't accept me and doesn't give me validation because of her Christian religion. The reverse of that would be I don't accept my mother for her religion. I don't give her validation. I don't accept her the way she is because of her religious views and what she chooses to believe.